Good morning. Say good morning. Good morning. That's better. How's everyone doing today?
So far, so good.
So far, so good. Okay.
Enjoying the sunshine.
Enjoying the sunshine, yes. But I'm also enjoying the fact that we got all that rain because the pond is finally full.
Oh, yes.
Jen is very happy, yes.
You're happy too.
Well, I don't know. We haven't really seen them. It's still too cold for them to peek up, but I'm assuming there's still a couple alive down there. How was everyone's week?
Cold.
Cold? Cold and wet, dreary?
Weird. Why is it weird?
I think it's either feast or famine for our house for days. Yesterday it was a birthday, a funeral, a fundraiser.
Oh, gee.
Oh, did you all go to Celeste's? Yeah, we were there at the very beginning. Took the food
Well,
home.
we closed down.
We showed up later because we were at the funeral.
Ah, okay.
You go from funeral lunch to barbecue.
Ate well.
I was gonna say 8 well.
We had some friends who came down from Bryan on Friday afternoon. We got to see them for a little bit, so that was nice.
Carmen?
No, it was Amanda and
Oh,
Tim
Amanda.
and the kids. Nothing else? All right. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for some sunshine. We thank you for the rain that we've had. Lord, be with those who aren't here, those who can't be here. And Lord, for those of us who are here, we ask you to bless all of us and to guide us in your way to do your work. In Christ's name.
Amen.
Any residual questions from last week?
We were all over last week.
Yeah, well, last week we started looking at the harmony of the Gospels, and then it started raining really loud, and you all had trouble hearing. So we are at, now it's kind of Luke 23 would be the Luke equivalent, but we'll be looking at these, and this is now Jesus being brought before Pilate the first time. Because remember, he goes to Pilate, and then he goes to Herod, and then he goes back to Pilate. So this is the first time that he's before. And I'll read John, and then we'll go back to Mark, Matthew, and Luke, as is up here. All right. John 18:39 is the start here. But, wait. Oh, wait, that's the second time. Sorry, we need to get the first time, which is, there we go. John 18:28. They led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourself and judge him by your own law." The Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from this world." Then Pilate said to him, "Ah, so you are a king." Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him." All right, from Mark 15. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered, "You have said so." We're going to come to that statement here in a little bit. And the chief priests accused him of many things. And Pilate again asked him, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made him no further answers, so Pilate was amazed. Matthew, very similar, from Matthew 27. They bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate, the governor. Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You have said so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" He gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. And then Luke 23. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate, and they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, the king." Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place." You find nothing interesting there?
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah.
The first one that you read, bring that up to the top.
In John?
Yes. It says something about people would be defiled if they enter the governor's headquarters or something.
Right, yeah.
Was that the law, or is that?
Well, I mean, because they were Gentiles and they wanted to keep themselves free from any kind of thing that might taint. I find an interesting thing of, Pilate asking him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he says, "You have said so." That doesn't seem to make much sense in ours. And it kind of irks me a little bit because none of the translations that I looked at, I think, have this quite right. Because it's not so much, especially in Matthew and Mark, the emphatic of "you" is used, and it's used first. So instead of more like, "Are you the king of the Jews?" it's, "You are the king of the Jews." Still, it's a question, but it's a question like, really, this person standing before me, stripped, beaten, and not, you don't look like a king. You are the king of the Jews? So the response, and Jesus uses the same emphatic of you have said so.
The truth came from his mouth.
Yes, and that's the other connotation that some of these have is, well, you have said so, so it must be true, so it must be the fact, right? And so it's very, very saucy of Jesus, and very clever in the way that he uses Pilate's words kind of back at him. And he used the same kind of connotation and stuff when talking with the chief priests and the elders too. When they would ask questions, he would kind of give back in a similar type of way.
Well, neither Jesus nor Pilate took the charges very seriously.
Yeah, they both know they're bogus. Yeah.
And a lot of charges too. There wasn't just.
Yeah, we hear some of them. Yeah, like Luke is the only one who says, he forbids paying taxes to Caesar and stuff like that. The others don't mention that at all. And of course, the one example I can think of when about paying taxes to Caesar is, "Teacher, is it lawful to pay taxes to Rome?" And he says, "Bring me a coin." He says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God." He certainly did not permit that.
So really, the Gentiles, the Pharisees, they could all say just anything.
As long as you collaborate, and
Right.
corroborate.
That translation says, in Luke that he was misleading them. Mine says subverting our nation.
Yeah, I think probably subverting probably makes more sense, especially given later, because that's interesting, because that's what one of the things Barabbas was accused of. Insurrection, subverting, stirring things up and causing insurrection and murder and
Subverting
robbery.
seems to me much more serious than misleading.
Well, and why put the aspect of he claims to be a king? Why use that as an argument?
It's the only thing they can think of that is actually against the Roman law.
Yeah, Rome would not look kindly on that, right? Yeah.
Because they're trying to find something Rome can count against him so they can put him to death, because what he's actually done is against the Jews only, and Rome does not really care about that.
Rome doesn't really care about that. So long as there's peace, they don't really care. Yeah, and that's why I think in John, you're like, take them yourself and judge them. Yeah. Why are you bugging me? Especially this early in the morning. I haven't even had my coffee,
So they're trying to make the Romans see Jesus as someone who would cause trouble, and then Rome would have to take care of it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because the Jews, they're sitting there, they're going, hey, we have a law, and by that law he must die. But to get Rome to care, they have to couch it in terms of, why should Pilate care? Why should you sentence him? Well, look at these things he's doing against Caesar, against Rome. That you can't have that. It's also, Pilate was also very skilled in the way that he asked questions too. So, you are the king of the Jews, and what's your option? If you say yes, well, yeah, prove that. You kind of just sentence yourself. And if you say no, well, then you're acquitted, right? And he can't have that, because he needs to go through this. So, Jesus doesn't play into the yes and no. He just puts it right back on Pilate. So as clever as Pilate was in trying to ask, Jesus was so much more in his answer.
Okay, the Old Testament, where in the Old Testament did they say that Jesus or the Messiah would be king? Or is this all New Testament?
Well, no, all of it, sitting on the throne of his father David, and there's tons that talk about, that the Messiah would be on the throne.
I just didn't remember the king.
But so are they considering him just like another? Because in Jerusalem, you said before that many prophets were put to death, or
Mm-hmm.
and so are they trying to lump him in with that kind of thing?
Well, interesting. I think that Jesus has placed himself squarely in that aspect of, a prophet cannot die, outside of Jerusalem. Jesus has put himself in that, and he's accused. It's one of the things that the Pharisees really didn't like him about, because he's likened them, like, you guys, you keep killing all the prophets, and they're like, oh, that's not us, we don't do that. But they see him as a false prophet. So they think that they're upholding all that is good, and Jesus is fulfilling the very thing that he said. No, that is about me, and you're doing exactly like you did to the previous ones.
Everybody's playing politics.
Everyone, yeah, it's amazing how politics just gets involved in everything.
But okay, so all the other prophets, were they also brought before the Roman authorities too?
Not Roman authorities, no. Israel usually just took care of them themselves.
Oh.
But the ones that killed, when Jesus said you killed the prophets, he meant in the Old Testament times.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else? All right, we'll go on to the next section, which this is just, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I came in late, but did you read verse 6 in Luke in the last part? Or?
We went through.
Okay,
Not yet.
We're getting there.
Not yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so but Luke Yeah, that's the next part here. Luke is the only one who covers him going over to Herod. So that's this part, verse 6. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. When he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some kind of sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, but Jesus made no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then arraying him in splendid clothing, sent him back to Pilate. Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this they had been at enmity with each other.
The advantage of wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah. And this is the same Herod, of course, that killed his cousin, John the Baptist.
But under duress.
Under duress. Yeah.
Well, from what?
Yeah, he didn't want to.
Yeah.
Not for the right reasons, but he didn't want to kill Herod. But he was by no means a good man.
Sure.
The whole family was a little rough.
It was a little, off.
Do we have any idea what the distance was between Pilate's place and Herod's place?
It wasn't all that far. Their palaces and stuff. But as far as jurisdiction, I'd have to look that up on how that actually played out. But it wouldn't have taken too long.
And what's curious to me is Herod was glad to get him because he wanted to see him do some of these miracles, signs, whatever you call it, that he'd heard about. And when Jesus wouldn't answer him, that's when he let his soldiers beat him up.
Well, we don't know. I suspect the soldiers were mocking him and doing that all the time. But
So Herod wanted a show?
yeah. Dance for me, monkey. Yeah. I think that's all they, to be entertained and entertain guests and stuff. And that Herod was all about that, right? I mean, that's how John the Baptist lost his head. He was being dumb and entertaining and promising things and. I do find it interesting that Luke is the only one that records this aspect with Herod. How about this aspect of Herod and Pilate becoming friends at that point? Yeah. That's something to bond over.
They had a common enemy.
I think it's more an enemy. It's the wing. No, it's the hey, I got this really interesting case. Take a look. It's flippant at best.
Luke, as a historian, it fascinates me that he came up with that piece of information.
Yeah.
From whom? Who was there?
Oh.
That's a really good question. Yeah, because it takes Luke research this stuff out. So, yeah.
Who did he research?
Yeah, and did John and some others who were there, were they following over to Herod and back, during all of this time? How did all that work? And if they did follow over, it's unlikely that he had the same in with Herod's, his servants that John had with Caiaphas' servants.
Is this the same Herod that wanted to kill him when he was born?
No, that's a different Herod.
But it was in the family.
It was in the family, yeah.
Well, so did that have any bearing on why Herod was so curious about Jesus at this time? I mean, he certainly didn't make the connection.
No, I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think that Jesus was a celebrity curiosity interest, something of the day, the news of the day. So, I think that's probably all that piqued his interest. All right, Jesus being brought back before Pilate. From John 18. You have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? They cried out again, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. Then they came up to him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews, and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him. Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, Behold the man. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, Crucify him! Crucify him! Pilate said to them, Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no guilt in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, Where are you from? Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate said to him, You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you? Jesus answered him, You would have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin. From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar. When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at the place called the Stone Pavement, and in Aramaic, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, Behold your king. They cried out, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus.
The chief priests say, We have no king but Caesar.
That and later when they said, Let his blood be on us and our children. All right, from Mark 15. At the feast, he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. But he answered them, saying, Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. So notice he's asking this of the people. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. Pilate again said to them, Then what shall I do with the man you call the king of the Jews? They cried out again, Crucify him. Pilate said, Why? What evil has he done? They shouted all the more, Crucify him. Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Matthew 27. At the free feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. They had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus called Christ? For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream. The chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, Which of the two do you want me to release for you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, Then what shall I do with Jesus who is called Christ? They all said, Let him be crucified. When he said, Why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, Let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves. All the people answered, his blood be on us and on our children. Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. And then Luke. Pilate called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people and said to them, You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish him and release him. They cried out together, Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city, and for murder. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, Crucify, crucify him. A third time he said to them, Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him. They were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will. I don't remember looking up, but Barabbas, Bar means son, and Abba is father, son of the father. I think it's if that's correct, that's very fitting and very interesting, because that's who Jesus, son.
It's interesting it came down to the choice of Barabbas, because obviously there had to be other prisoners. And was Barabbas kind of the Robin Hood of the Jews, and he had
well, we don't really know much about Barabbas, except for kind of what's here. But yeah, there had to have been others in prison, because obviously Jesus was crucified with two others, at least, right? So why were they not in the mix? I don't know.
It's almost as if somebody said, we'll take the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And put him up against your candidate, and we'll have an election.
yeah. And it didn't go well. Jesus was voted off the island.
Pilate, all through this, is inclined to let Jesus go. And then when he hears that he's been called the Son of God, he's more afraid. His wife warns him, don't fool around with this guy. And yet, at the end, when he sees he's got to give him to the crowd, otherwise there'll be a riot, he still has him scourged. Now, I can see if he was going to turn him loose, look, I'm going to punish him, I'm going to scourge him.
Well, he's scourged. He's letting them be scourged and mocked and doing all this well before all of that happened.
I know, but if he really was afraid and convinced of his innocence, I don't see why he went the extra mile and had him scourged.
Well, it does kind of question, okay, he's going to be dead in a few hours. Why bother, punishing anymore? It seems kind of over the top.
Well, Pilate apparently felt that the brutality of the scourging would turn the crowds.
Yeah, I wonder if that's some of it. That scourging him and dressing him, this mock way, maybe that'll placate.
I mean, behold the man.
Behold the man. Come on, look. Hasn't he suffered enough? Maybe that was part of his thing. His motivations are certainly in question. And let's get something straight here. For Pilate, maybe looking and wanting to release and being afraid and all these things, Pilate was not a good man. He was not a nice man. He was not a lenient, merciful man. But he did know, as a good politician, he knew which direction the winds were flowing, and he followed those.
A riot would have been political.
Exactly. And as well as, them, I don't think it was lost on him that the chief priests and stuff were like, if you release this guy, you're no friend of Caesar's. That's a threat, right? Hey, you could lose your kingdom here, because if you don't do what we say, we can go running up to Daddy, Caesar in Rome, and have a chat with who your ally is here.
How come Mark, Matthew, and Luke doesn't speak up for flogging like John does?
Well, again, they each have their own purpose in writing theirs, and they each have their own audience. So some of the things that are more pertinent to their audience and their purpose, and some others. So there's going to be some things, and just like if there was some, let's say there was an explosion right outside across the street over here, and I was to ask all of you, like right away, to write down exactly what happened and what happened right after it. Some of you would be able to see it. Some would just hear it. Some would see the commotion. Some would, so you would all kind of record differently. It's the same thing that happened, but it's through some different eyes and different perspectives.
However, if it's all divinely inspired, they don't have to see it, hear it, or hear about it.
But God is using that regardless. Okay. And so it doesn't have to be identical. And God He chose His people because of their unique aspects and perspectives and situations.
So which Caesar was this?
I believe it's Antipas. As opposed to, there was such a line of Herods. It's hard for me to remember who. There was Archelaus, Antipas. Trying to remember the others. I don't remember the family line.
One of the Ptolemies.
Yeah, and there's some things to suggest there might have been some mental health issues within this family.
Yeah.
Is that
Led
like
in the gauntlet.
Yeah.
Is that like what is their title, like the emperor of the world, or what? The Caesars or whatever?
Well, Caesar was, and it didn't come, I don't think, until Julius Caesar, that Caesar was considered a living god.
No.
That was not always the case. It's also interesting just where we get a lot of even names of other leaders that come from Caesar. Obviously, the Tsar, the Russian Tsar, that Tsar comes from the term Caesar. So all of these other world leaders that came after Rome, can trace some aspect, if not lineage, something to that role and that title.
Even if it was false. Even if it was false.
Even if it was false.
Yeah, it's just like the people that believe they're reincarnated in their past lives they were Cleopatra.
Right. Yeah. Rome was an interesting thing because for a long time it was a democratic republic, right? And it was not really by this time.
Julius Caesar changed it all.
Julius Caesar changed. Yeah, he changed a lot. Yeah, the Senate and stuff was more show than anything else.
Kind of like today's Senate.
Moving on.
Yes.
It's amazing how God used these evil men to bring about His purpose.
And I wonder, is Satan thinking the same thing? Using these wonderful men for my purpose, when it's really his purpose through it all,
Did Satan not know that he was an accomplice in the plan?
That's a really tricky question.
He's not omniscient.
He's not omniscient, yeah, but it does beg the question. Because it makes it seem like he's kind of obtuse.
Yeah,
To think that he's going to get away with this.
I think that's, to me, that's the way I see it too. Satan thinks he's winning, he thinks he's winning, up until the time Jesus goes down into Sheol and preaches to the...
Yeah, that would be a pretty clear indication. And then the Sunday morning,
Yeah, then he'd say, oh, shoot.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what he said. Anything else on this section? All right.
People, crowds, how riots and all just start from just a few to just, then they all are saying the same thing, and I mean, it happens today too. It's just kind of
Crowds have a mind and mentality of their own. I mean, it's an entity in and of itself. It's just like any class, working in schools, you see that every class has a unique personality.
That's ironic coming from your class. I know a fourth grade teacher could talk about that.
Anywho, every class has their own unique personality, that's unique from the individuals in it. I mean, them as a whole, they have a personality. The way that they react, the way that they operate, the way that they function, and crowds are no different here. There's a great line from, I think it was the first Men in Black movie. And I think it was Will Smith's character said something to the effect of, people are smart, they're going to figure this out. He goes, individuals are smart. People are as dumb as the day is long. Yeah, I mean, there was something along those lines that you get people together and you lose some of that individual, because there's a whole study on groupthink. So it's called groupthink, that people in crowds, because you sit there and you say, I don't think that's right, but you don't want to speak up. You don't want to, go against someone else. Well, maybe they know better or something. I mean, so the dynamics are very different than if you ask individuals on certain specific things. As a group, it's very, very different.
Yeah, because as a group, they can't agree on anything and everyone gets angry.
I can mask my feelings in yours.
Yeah, right. And be it for good or bad, right?
But were the apostles in this crowd?
I would venture to think that most of the apostles were around in this. We certainly see some of the women in this. I mean, when Jesus is going on to Via Dolorosa, that they're along the way. So I wouldn't imagine that it'd be any different for the apostles.
Well, I'm just thinking, if we had seen all of Jesus' miracles and we were a follower and we were in that crowd, I would like to think I wouldn't have crucified him. But there probably were some believers in the crowd that got wrapped up in it.
I think that you're talking larger than the apostles. You're talking just disciples. No, I think that is very, very possible.
But I mean, that goes back to you individually now. Are you willing to stand up for what you believe?
And it's different. It's very easy to say, no, if I was here, if I was this, then I would do this. I mean, Peter thought that too.
Yeah.
Right?
But when the odds are 100 to 1, then you're intimidated.
Yeah, well, intimidation is one of the emotions that would come up. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go through your mind and play.
But they could also be thinking that if he's fixing to die, this is the power that we're going to be under. We really don't want to rock the boat too much here.
Yeah, and do I really want to be associated with that? If this is the outcome for him, it's a pretty short step to have that outcome be for me. So let's get together and lock the doors and hide out for a while. Let's let things pass over. All right. Matthew and Mark, the only ones who record these Roman soldiers mocking Jesus. From Mark 15, excuse me. The soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters. They called together the whole battalion, and they clothed him in a purple cloak and twisted together a crown of thorns. They put it on him, and they began to salute him. "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they were striking his head with a reed and spitting on him and kneeling down in homage to him. And from Matthew 27. The soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters. They gathered the whole battalion before him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and put a reed in his right hand. Kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spit on him and took the reed and struck him on the head.
Sarcasm isn't new.
It's not new. Yeah.
How many are in a battalion?
I was gonna ask that.
I don't remember. I
David is.
I don't remember. I used to know, for centurion, you have battalion, and yeah, I don't remember. Why do you think purple or scarlet?
Royal.
Yeah, those are royal colors. They were hard to come by. They were expensive and stuff. Which begs the question: where do you get, some purple that was expendable to put on this guy that's, bleeding and everything else?
If you're paying for it with your taxes, it's no problem for me to give him.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Why is it two different colors?
Well, and they're similar colors. They don't have. There wasn't the nuance of all the colors that we use today.
If I remember right, purple was a dye that could only be created with some sort of sea creatures or something like that. They had a very limited way of making purple.
It is one of some of the reasons, anymore for like Lent and Advent, or not Lent, but Advent specifically, that blue is used, because that's also considered a royal color. But it used to be scarlet and other. There used to be more colors that were used in liturgical settings, but we kind of narrowed them down to just a few more, a few less.
I did Google.
Oh, well, all hail Google. Let's hear it.
It says a full battalion of Roman soldiers would have included 600 men at full strength, mocking Jesus as the King of the Jews.
600, huh?
That's what it says.
6 centurions.
Yeah, because a centurion, by definition, cent, being 100.
But then another place says it could be between 300 and 1,300.
So that's a lot.
So basically, yeah, we don't know, but it was more than a handful.
Yeah. I didn't think it would have been that many.
Me either.
To pull all those men together just to ridicule one man.
Yeah, it does seem a bit excessive.
But they were all in town because it was the Passover, it was a big festival, lots of people.
Well, especially, they probably were called to order too when you got this big crowd that's getting a little out of hand. You're calling in all the people to make sure things stay even keel.
Well, if there were anywhere close to that number in that battalion of soldiers, it makes you kind of think that this crowd was a lot bigger than my brain was thinking.
Very possible.
I was thinking.
And again, this is early in the morning. This is yeah. How do you get that many people that early?
FYI for useless information. The color.
It's usually my dad that shares that kind of stuff.
Glad to help.
The dye came from a snail.
Snail.
That was harvested off the coast of Murex snails. And can you imagine how many snails it would take to get the dye that they needed? But that's what.
Well, then you just cook them up and make some escargot along the way, right?
But that was what Lydia did when she was, the purple cloth, make her a purple in that area.
And you're wearing purple today.
What am I like?
Yeah.
Those great like her.
All right. Jesus on the Via Dolorosa from John. And incidentally, Golgotha and Calvary, they mean the same thing. One is Aramaic and one is Latin. That's pretty much it. And you can see that in the right-hand column over here too. From John. So Pilate delivered Jesus over to them to be crucified. They took Jesus, and he went out, bearing his own cross, to the place called the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. Now before this, John was the one with the longest one, but this is pretty succinct. From Mark. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him, and they led him out to crucify him. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. And there they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. Matthew 27. When they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And then Luke 23. As they led him away, they seized one, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid on him the cross to carry it behind Jesus. And they followed him a great multitude of people and of women who were mourning and lamenting for him. But he turned to them and said, Luke's the only one who puts this, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? 2 others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on his right and the other on his left.
That's like when Jesus looked over Jerusalem and wept,
Yeah, and why did he? I mean, he says, how often I would have longed to have you as a hen gathers her chicks, but you were not willing.
The Mark and Matthew accounts of them being offered wine mixed with gall or myrrh or whatever
Right.
it is, I don't know. That was an anesthetic, I suppose, of some sort of kind of.
Yeah, it was probably also very bitter, but yeah, that was, and obviously similar to what he was offered on the cross.
Yeah, but he took it on the cross.
He said, I thirst, and they gave him some, whether he drank it or not.
Kind of the cannabis of his day.
Yeah.
Myrrh was used in ancient Israelite temple worship as an ingredient in the holy anointing oil for consecrating priests.
Well, yeah, that was one of the uses, and it's also one of the reasons that it was one of the 3 gifts that the wise men gave. I mean,
so were they mocking him, saying you really are not a king?
No. I think that was a mixture that was already there. I think it was more anesthetic and aesthetic.
It also said it was also used in embalming.
Yes.
Oh.
And when he was given this at his birth, that was a foreshadowing to his death and burial. I find, John has him carrying his own cross. The other 3 have Simon carrying for it. So he probably carried it for part of the way, and then they brought in Cyrene. It's interesting that Mark, even gives the name of this guy's kids.
Yeah. Well, they put the purple robe on him to send the message that
what, you think you're king, but you're really not the.
I think that's it. I think it is purely a mocking
Stripped
gesture.
him of that because.
It was a kangaroo court.
That's right.
Yeah, and of course they took that cloak back, so they can mock other people in the future probably too. Right?
I mean, and the sad thing about it is they were all about kind of like now winning the war. I'm the king, you're not. They never did really get the whole picture.
No, they didn't.
Pastor, question.
Yeah.
Jesus did all these miracles, pastored all these people, the Sermon on the Mount, fishes in the loaves. I mean, thousands and thousands. To me, it seems like it's thousands of people. Where were they?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, and I mean, because we're talking less than a week before, they're welcoming him on Palm Sunday. Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna to the Son of David, right? They're welcoming him as a king. Less than a week later, where are they? Yeah, the fickleness of people is staggering.
They didn't get what they wanted.
They did, yeah.
And it only took them a week to figure out.
To figure out.
I kind of think they aren't the same people. Remember at the end of Casablanca when...
Well, you think this has the hallmark of a beautiful friendship, or what are we saying?
No, before that, when Henri says to his lieutenant, round up the usual suspects. And I think the chief priests, they had a rent-a-crowd that they could call on to do their bidding.
Rent a crowd.
That's not a far cry. They had rented women to week.
Yeah, I certainly there could have been some, but I think it's would be hard pressed to say that the crowd would be that big of just these people. You might have them sprinkled around that are trying to direct and encourage that.
Right.
But I don't think you rent that many.
I always think of it as a courtyard, but I think there were a lot more people than what I'm thinking. And if you just sprinkle, a few of the rabble-rousers throughout the crowd to get everybody stirred up, especially in the morning before you've had your coffee,
Yeah.
And then too, there weren't cell phones, so how many people didn't even know this was happening?
Well, I mean, there certainly could be some of that. Yeah. But it's hard to imagine that all of this took place in isolation. I mean, even without cell phones and Twitter and whatnot, word gets around.
But the good people are home asleep in their beds. The people who are...
I mean, okay, but again, where are these disciples and these women that are along the way?
Yeah, see, that's...
I mean, you can't, I don't think you can make a case for saying that it wasn't known among those who were closest. And if not known to them, why wouldn't some of them go and wake others up and try to balance things out?
And the noise.
And the noise, yeah, there would be that too. You'd hear that there's ruckus going on.
But Pastor, you messed up my stories.
That's my whole goal in life, Patsy.
I really like the thought that the people that were the Hosannas and all on Palm Sunday were not the same people. It's kind of like the manger scene.
I know, I messed that one up for you too. That's my goal in life. I want to see what your preconceived notions are, and I want to mess with them.
I mean, do you really think that was the same people? That
I think that there's certainly a number of them that had to have been the same.
But there,
I don't know. Well, go ahead.
well, also on Palm Sunday, there were a lot of people in Jerusalem at that time because that was a week before Passover, and it was lamb selection day. And so they were coming in buying their lambs and stuff for they had to buy 7 days before the Passover meal. So they had a bunch of people in from outskirts too. I
True.
think. But it could be.
But you consider that even the people from outside. I mean, people knew who Jesus was. I mean, that word was around. And hey, look who's here, celebrity.
I was looking at what Carolyn was saying too about the wailing, because wasn't it the custom then that the women, I don't know the men, I always think of the women just screaming, yelling, crying so loudly at a death.
I know there's some cultural aspect to it. I don't know if that was the cultural aspect here. I think these were actually women who were disciples who loved Jesus, I think that's who the ones that they're talking about here.
There was nobody to pay these.
Yeah, I don't think these were professional wailers.
Okay.
I don't think, but I don't, that's my guess. Okay, I think we're gonna need to leave it there. Moby Dick? What is Moby Dick? What?
Professional whaler.
Very good.
Okay, Paul, if he likes that does not bode well for you. All right, let's go with the benediction. Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you his peace. Amen. God bless and have a good week. Bye-bye.